Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Jim, just to confirm that the votes will be taken at the end of the afternoon session. Conference, we're now moving on to the next session, that is Brexit and the economy. This is a debate on how the Tories have spent more time arguing amongst themselves and negotiating with Europe, putting jobs and the economy at risk. Labour will invest to create good, secure jobs in every community and negotiate a Brexit deal that puts jobs and living standards first, with a new comprehensive UK-EU customs union and a new single market deal. Our first speaker is Keir Starmer, Shadow Secretary of State for exiting the European Union.
Thanks very much, Conference. It's fantastic to be back here in Liverpool, a city of great passion and energy. Although there was an odd moment on Sunday afternoon as my team Arsenal were beating Everton, and I got smiles from one side and scowls from the other. But passion and energy in lumps here. And talking of passion and energy, can I just begin by thanking my fantastic shadow Brexit team. Jenny Chapman, Paul Blomfield and Matt Pennicook, who've been the shadow ministers doing fantastic work, Emma Hardy, Jess Morden and Diane Hayter leading for us in the Lords, along with Angela Smith, our leader in the Lords. Thank you all for the work that you've done for us in these difficult times. Conference, can I also thank a very special group of colleagues with us, and that's our Labour MEPs. These last 2 years have been especially difficult for you, but you've led our party in Europe and acted for our country in Europe, and we owe you a debt of gratitude. Thank you to all of our MPs, present and past. Conference, the last 2 years has not been easy. Like many of you, I was devastated by the result of the referendum. Like many of you, I had campaigned and voted to remain. Not for the technical benefits of membership, important though they are, but because I'm proud to say I'm an internationalist. I believe that nations achieve more together than they do alone. I believe that the challenges facing our nation, whether that's conflict, terrorism, climate change, those challenges are best met together with our EU partners. And Conference, if we think of the opportunities facing our nation, scientific research, medical developments, education, art and culture, those opportunities are going to be realised best with our EU partners. And Conference, those values of collaboration and cooperation, they didn't die on the 23rd of June 2016, and they must guide everything that we do as we go through the Brexit process, because we cannot give in to the narrow ideology that is driving the Tory approach to Brexit. And Conference, that's why we did not duck the challenge of Brexit. It would have been easy to wish away the result, but we didn't. We stepped up, we stood together, and we fought the government tooth and nail. And Conference, we were right to do that. We were right to say jobs and the economy must come first. We were right to say that EU citizens are not bargaining chips. We were right to say there's going to need to be a transition period so we don't go off a cliff. And we were right to say we need a customs union with the EU to protect our manufacturing base and to keep the solemn commitment to no hard border in Northern Ireland. And we were right to argue for a single market deal to go with that customs union. And we were absolutely right to insist that Parliament has a meaningful vote on the Article 50 deal that the Prime Minister seeks to bring back. And I'm glad we stepped up to those challenges. But conference, we're about to be tested again. Over the next few weeks and months, hugely important decisions are going to be made that are going to affect each and every one of us. And what does the Prime Minister say? Even in the aftermath of Salzburg, she says, trust me on Brexit. Trust her on Brexit. Trust the Prime Minister whose first choice as Foreign Secretary was Boris Johnson. Her second choice was the man who's been running down the NHS for the past few years. Conference, this Prime Minister is responsible for the hostile environment. This Prime Minister appointed a Secretary of State for Northern Ireland who doesn't understand the basics about Northern Ireland, let alone the complexities. So, conference, this Prime Minister does not deserve our trust. Just when we need strong government, strong leadership, what have we got? Division, chaos, failure. The government has no credible plan for Brexit weeks out from the deadline. No credible solution for Northern Ireland weeks out from the deadline. And it's blindingly obvious that there's no majority for Chequers. The Prime Minister must have been the only person surprised last week that Chequers was not going to be accepted either in Europe or by our own party. But conference, what has happened is that the Tory civil war on Europe that's been going on for years now risks our prosperity. The party, do you remember, that promised to fix the roof whilst the sun was shining is now intent on burning the house down. So, conference, I've got a message for the Prime Minister. If your party wants to tear itself apart, that's fine. But you're not taking our country with you. And conference, that is why Labour set 6 tests for Brexit. Not just technical tests, but tests that set out the sort of country, the sort of society that we want, where the well-being of all our communities matter. Those tests weren't plucked from thin air. They were taken from promises and commitments that the government made about what it would achieve in these negotiations. The Prime Minister's response to the test was that she was determined to meet them. Well, things may be going hopelessly wrong for her. She may have lowered her expectations, but I'm not lowering mine. And conference, I know you want to know, our members want to know where we stand on our tests going into this important vote in the autumn. Some say we may vote for the deal that the Prime Minister brings back, maybe abstain, maybe vote for a vague deal. So let me be absolutely clear. If the Prime Minister returns with a deal that does not meet our tests, and that looks increasingly likely, we will vote against her deal. And Conference, if the Prime Minister thinks that she can come back with a vague deal, asking us to leap blindfold into the unknown, we will vote that down. Conference, we didn't set tests that could be met by refusing to answer the question. A vague or blind Brexit is a leap to nowhere, and we'll have no part of it. Now, Conference, let's be clear. This is not about frustrating the process. It is about stopping a destructive Tory Brexit. It is about fighting for our values, and it is about fighting for our country. And Conference, when it comes to that vote in Parliament, we do not accept that the choice is between whatever the Prime Minister manages to cobble together or no deal. That is not a meaningful vote. Between really bad and even worse, no deal would be a catastrophe, and no government has the right to plunge our country into chaos because of their own failures. So if Parliament votes down the Prime Minister's deal, or she can't reach a deal, that is not the end of the debate. And Labour must step up again and shape what happens next. Our preference is clear. We want a general election to sweep away this failed government. And Conference, having swept them away, we want to install a radical Labour government capable of transforming this country. And that's what should happen after 2 years of negotiations ending in failure. But if that's not possible, we must have other options. And Conference, that must include campaigning for a public vote. Conference, it's right that Parliament has the first say. It's right that Parliament has the first say. But if we need to break the impasse, our options must include campaigning for a public vote, and nobody is ruling out Remain as an option. And Conference, thank you, Conference. And can I... That's why I'm very pleased that we as a party can put our full weight behind this morning's motion, which will be moved by the GMB. And can I just thank all of the delegates, the hundreds of delegates, who sweated it out with us on Sunday night for nearly 6 hours to get a motion that we could put forward. Conference, you know and our members know that there are differences of opinion on Brexit, but what happened in that session is we reached a consensus. We were able to put a united position before Conference today. Conference, just to fast forward a week to contrast the position when we vote on our motion, our consensus motion, in a united Labour Party way. Fast forward to the chaos you're likely to see at the Tory Party conference, where they weren't able to agree anything at all. Now, conference, you will appreciate that all of us in the room on Sunday evening missed the last episode of The Bodyguard. There are nearly 300 people walking around not wanting to know what happened. So if you watched it, please don't tell us what happened. We haven't caught up yet. And Conference, one final but important point. Whatever the deal the Prime Minister does or doesn't bring back, that's only part of the debate. The referendum was not just about technical membership of the EU. It was much wider and much deeper than that. It became a vote on the state of the nation. It became a vote on economics and politics and how they work, or in many cases, don't work. And millions of people sent us a very clear message that we must transform our economy, rebuild our public services, tackle inequality wherever it is, and give power back to our communities. There can be no satisfactory response to the referendum unless we have the right relationship with the EU, but also the right deal for Britain. Conference, I'm under no illusion about the challenge ahead. We're going through uncertain times, and Brexit has divided the country. But we must remain united in the fight for our values, values that hold our party together, and values which I think could bring the country back together. That is our challenge, and we must rise to it. Thank you, Conference. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Keir. He makes it sound easy. Conference, we have a number of items in this debate. These include the contemporary composites on Brexit and government contracts. The main Policy Commission report we are considering is that of Environment, Energy and Climate Change on pages 39 to 54 of the National Policy Forum report. We have also been notified of a proposal to refer back on a section of the National Policy Forum report. So first we'll move on to the contemporary composites, and the first one we'll take is contemporary composite number 5 on Brexit, to be moved by the GMB, and could Exeter CLP be ready to second? Thank you.
Good morning, Conference. Tim Roach, GMB, moving Composite 5, and in doing so, can I first of all pay tribute to Keir Starmer? What a class act. And doesn't it just show that if you have someone leading negotiations who has integrity and working people at their very heart, then that's what can be achieved. Keir, well done. And Conference, I genuinely wish I didn't have Just when they go to work, rights, they have a say, that they have their safety. It's not discarded by red tape, by the Bullingdon Club Tories who have never done a day's work in their bloody lives. So yes, the country voted to leave, but people didn't vote leave for more uncertainty, more insecure jobs. It was the lack of power over their own lives that led to them wanting to take back control. People didn't vote leave to see household bills skyrocket. It was the daily struggle to provide for their families that led to the rejection of a broken system. And people didn't vote for the privatisation of even more services through dodgy backroom trade deals. They voted leave because they couldn't get an appointment with their GP. They couldn't get their kids into a local school. Conference, I have no faith whatsoever in this government's ability to get a deal for working people, to address these very issues. No faith the government will pass Labour's 6 tests. Because the reality out there is that imports in food, in manufacturing, in pharmaceuticals, in energy, in health, right across our country, workers and employers alike are telling me that there is no plan. The Prime Minister is held hostage by her own ministers. She has no plan A, let alone a plan B, no deal, no security, no clue, not even the confidence of her own people. But if Theresa May is so confident and assured of her deal, well, let's put it to the test then. Let's let the people decide. Because that conference is what we do as trade unionists, day in, day out. We negotiate the best possible deal, then we put it back to our members for them to decide. And that's even more essential as the mask of the Tory Brexiteers continues to slip. Only yesterday, they cheered extreme proposals that would take an axe to working time directive proposals. Theresa May should have condemned Boris Johnson and Michael Gove for their conduct and lies. Instead, she gave them a bloody job in her cabinet. It's a scandal conference. So this is the crux of the entire debate. In whose interests do the government negotiate? Hardline Tory toffs who are holding the Prime Minister to ransom. For the spivs and speculators, for the cosy capitalist cabal, their mate Donald Trump at the front of the queue when they're already circling our NHS, for the bosses and bankers who care not about what led us here in the first place, they care just about the bottom line bank balance. Conference, that Brexit would be a disaster for those of us who believe in equality, in social justice and a fairer economy. We need workplace rights that allow workers to really take back control of their lives. An end to freeloading, free trading, tax dodging by multinationals like Amazon, who make billions on the back of mainstreaming insecure workers while shirking their responsibility to the taxpayers. It would mean real investment in communities that were decimated by Thatcher and never truly rebuilt. And it would mean an end to austerity that is crippling communities, killing public services, so sending people, working people, to food banks. So, Conference, I'll conclude with this. If Theresa May can't get a deal that works for working people, then step aside. Let's have a general election. Let's get a party in government that will get a deal for working people. Conference, I'm proud to move. Thank you.
Good morning, Conference. Jane Begley from Exeter CLP. This is my first time at Conference and my first time as a speaker. I certainly didn't expect to come to Liverpool. To come to Liverpool and be addressing you all on such a pivotal issue. Nervous comes nowhere near to describing how I'm feeling right now. It's a great honour and a privilege to stand before you today to second this motion, a motion we worked on till midnight on Sunday evening. Such was our commitment to finding a solution. I feel passionately about being part of the European Union, and when I joined the party in 2015, my first introduction to canvassing was pounding the streets in support of Remain. The result was a crushing disappointment, even though in Exeter we achieved a 55% vote to Remain. I was disappointed, not just for myself, but for my then 15-year-old daughter, who was angry that she didn't get a vote, yet she and all her friends, the young people of this country, are the ones who will be most impacted by this result, badly impacted by this result. YouGov reported that over 70% of under-25s voted Remain. I came of age with the belief that it was the duty of each generation to improve the lot of the generations that follow them. Brexit is another example of how my generation, and this government in particular, have comprehensively screwed over our young people. When I went to university, not only was it free, but I was paid to go. My wonderful and intelligent, now 17-year-old daughter has serious doubts and may not pursue a degree because she is so put off by the prospect of acquiring a burden of debt. And I share her anger. In May, I was elected to Exeter City Council, taking a seat from the Tories. I represent a ward that contains both areas of affluence and areas of deprivation. The concerns of the doorstep about Brexit did not come from the poorest areas of the ward, and this was reflected across our country, where the poorest and most disenfranchised were those who voted most decisively to leave. I do believe it was a vote against the status quo, a vote against austerity, and a vote against David Cameron, the worst possible poster boy for the Remain campaign, who promptly turned on his heels and ran away. The shambolic way in which the Tory government have conducted their so-called negotiations have shown us all how inadequate they are to the task of sorting out the unholy mess they have created. As a second-generation Irish immigrant who was raised with the perpetual backdrop of the Troubles on the national news in the 1970s, I am offended by the cavalier carelessness they have shown towards concerns about the Irish border. The risk of a no-deal Brexit is terrifyingly imminent. What we desperately need is a general election to move the Tories aside and let us hand the task to Keir Starmer and our superb leadership team, a team that has relentlessly and consistently worked with the greatest integrity, inspiring more trust and hope than I have ever felt for any politicians. Thousands like me have become activated to do all they can to become part of the change we want to see. This has been reflected in the number of people we have heard from over the last few days who are here at conference and speaking for the first time. Whilst I personally would love for us to remain in the EU, we must take care that by committing wholeheartedly to another referendum at this stage, we do not alienate all of those people across great swathes of our nation who with sincerity voted leave. The risk is that they may then dismiss us as being just the same as all the rest and not listening to their concerns. This is why I ask you, Conference, to support this motion, a motion that does not bind but empowers our leadership to negotiate through the unpredictable times ahead. Thank you, Conference. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Next contemporary composite 6 on government contracts has been moved by Unison, and could Bladen CLP be ready to second? Point of order. You just hold fire. We've got a point of order. Just hang fire. Yeah, could the point of order come forward?
I'm here from St Austell and Newquay, CLP. My point of order is that we haven't all got copies of the report today, and that seems bad planning, knowing how many delegates are here. And it means that we can't take the best possible position in the debate because we haven't got the information. And I, for one, haven't got the technology to read it on a smartphone or anything that I can properly read. So I would like to request that more copies are printed and that more copies are provided tomorrow. Thank you.
Yeah, that was raised, so CAC will be dealing with that. Dave? Thank you.
Okay. Dave, Prentice, Unison, moving composite 6. My union, Unison, has always led the fight against privatisation. And conference, how shameful that our fight was far too often against a new Labour leadership. Year after year, I've stood at this rostrum, heckled and hissed at by new Labour ministers, heckled for opposing their privatisation plans. Conference, gullible new Labour ministers, seduced by the promises of vulture capitalism, sucked in by the likes of G4S, Capita and Carillion. Gullible new Labour ministers, wined and dined, bedazzled by chief executives of multinational companies. Chief executives who promised so much and who delivered so little for our people. The conference, much has changed in our party. Now, thanks to the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell, those dark days are gone. And conference, let us clearly say, loud and clear, never, never, never again. Never again beholden to the profiteers, never again seduced by their false promises, never again falling for that mantra, private good, public bad. Conference, a mile from here stands a shell of an empty hospital, half built, half finished, the Royal Liverpool Hospital, a £300 million building site, abandoned by Carillion. Carillion, too big to fail, now crumbling into dust. Carillion, a private company, praised by the Tories, lauded by New Labour, now leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Workers unpaid, apprentices sacked, and in this great city, left without its promised new hospital, an epic monument to failure. And conference, just as Grenfell will forever be associated with neglect, so Carillion will always be associated with greed. Conference, I'm so proud that at long last our Labour Party is led by those who oppose privatisation of all of our public services. I've waited all my life for this. Our party, led by Jeremy Corbyn, a proud Unison member who has always stood with us on protests, campaigning against hospital closures, council cuts, privatisation. That's the kind of Member of Parliament our party needs. The kind of MP who stands with you when times are tough, not just when they want something. So I want to say to everyone in this hall and every MP, get behind our leader, get behind the policies, get behind the party, and campaign for the best manifesto we have ever put to the British people. And I want this conference to make a clear and categorical promise to our people, to our delegation over here. 1.3 million Unison members provide our public services. 250,000 of them are now in the private sector. Over 1 million of our members are women doing low-paid jobs providing our public services. And I want a commitment, and we have it, from our leadership that they no longer will work just in the interest of the rich, but we will be a party that works for the cleaners, the carers, the cooks, the teaching assistants, the nurses, the people in our delegation over here, the members I am so proud to represent. We need our party preparing for power, looking outwards, moving upwards, standing united. That's what our country needs when there are kids sleeping rough on the streets of cities like this, or the 50 Birmingham care workers leafleting outside our conference only yesterday, fighting pay cuts, longer hours. And it really, really would mean so much to those lovely people that you met yesterday. It really would mean so much to them to know that you stand with them in solidarity. Let them hear you are with them. Conference, we need unity more than ever. United behind radical policies, not outdated dogmas of the past. United behind leadership that is no longer timid. For the first time in a generation, we have the opportunity to be bold, bring our people back in local government, bring our people back into the health service where they belong, and make this a year one priority, not an aspiration. Our people need help now. A day one commitment to end the scourge of privatisation, a day one commitment to bring services back in-house, inspiring our communities, our party united, our party strong, our party in power. There's so much to be optimistic about. I move.
Conference, Siobhan Foy, Blaydon CLP Youth Delegate. Proud to be second in this motion, proud to be part of the fight against privatisation. Conference, I know from my own experiences how much pressure public services are under and the impact of privatisation, how budgets are squeezed, how people like me, as a young carer, as a teaching assistant, are forced to pay the price. Our CLP has always been prominent in the fight for public services and for those services to be publicly owned and publicly run. And in recent years, we've had two fantastic Unison MPs in Blaydon, Dave Anderson and Liz Twist. They have always stood against the privatisation agenda in Westminster and in our community. Likewise, we've got a local council in Gateshead that has a strong track record of keeping services in-house. Locally run services that serve the community, not private profit. So we're delighted that Unison have taken the stance against privatisation outlined in this motion, continuing to make the case that they've been making for decades, one we are proud to support, that public services don't belong in the private sector, they belong in the public sector. Under Jeremy Corbyn, we have a historic opportunity to right the wrongs of the past. No longer can we, or indeed should we, accept that privatisation is inevitable. No longer can we, or again should we, accept that some services are going to be run for profit rather than for the benefit of our communities. No longer can we, or will we, accept that our NHS, care workers and support staff, people our communities rely on, are being hived out into the private sector. Unaccountable services which put profit before people. Conference today, let's send a message loud and clear to those in Westminster and beyond that we've had enough of the privatisers, the money men, giving us the bare minimum that they think they can get away with. Instead, let's demand better. Let's demand public services, all public services, are brought back in-house in the first year of our next Labour government. Let's demand the end of privatisation, full stop. And let's demand that public services are always accountable, always about decency and respect, always about need and never about profit. Thank you, Conference. Please support the motion.
Thank you, Conference. The next contemporary composite is number 7 on government contracts, to be moved by the Fire Brigade Union and seconded by Unite.
Chair, Conference, Andy Noble, Fire Brigade Union, moving composite motion 7, bizarrely in the middle of a little issue called Brexit. Comrades, there's currently 5 local authorities in England where the Police and Crime Commission has taken over governance of the Fire and Rescue Service: Essex, Cambridgeshire, Staffordshire, Northamptonshire and West Mercia. I'll leave you to find out what the common denominator is there. Most recently, on the 6th of September, legislation was laid down to give North Yorkshire PCC control of fire and rescue. These takeovers can be made by either agreement with the relevant local authority or, more worryingly, and without a mandate, in the form of an aggressive takeover, the only requirement being a submission of a business case to the Secretary of State. The FBU strongly opposes PCC takeovers of fire and rescue services and has actively fought against them. We've had our successes, for example, recently in Hertfordshire, where FBU officials and local councillors fought a successful campaign. The FBU applauds the current Labour Party position that takeovers in any form are inappropriate, but the real fear of FBU officials and representatives alike is that we're fighting against a rapidly turning tide. We oppose PCC takeovers because firefighters provide a humanitarian service. They're neither agents of the state nor enforcers of the law. The arguments in favour place too much emphasis on efficiency savings. PCCs put forward business models. The Fire and Rescue Service isn't a business. It's an essential emergency service. Yes, it needs to be efficient. Yes, it needs to be economic, but above all, it needs to be effective. Transference of governance is a threat to the independence and neutrality of the fire service. Rightly or wrongly, we're able to access areas of our communities that our colleagues in the police force sometimes find a little more difficult. Quite often those parts of our communities that are most at risk. If we lose that access because of a perceived change of identity, we lose some of our existing effectiveness, particularly in areas such as our preventative work and our educational activities. Combined police-fire governance will inevitably lead to combined budgets, and existing financial allocations could be plundered to fund other PCC projects. The fire service is already creaking at the seams. Some would even say it's already burst. Either way, it's a shadow of its former self. Since 2010, central government budget cuts of 40% to the fire and rescue service. Nationally, over 12,000 firefighter posts lost. That's 1 in 5 frontline firefighters, dozens of fire stations closed, fire engines reduced, and the first engine on scene at arrival at an incident, on average 2 minutes slower than it has been previously. Ask any operational firefighter how a fire can develop in that 2 minutes, and it doesn't give you a happy explanation. The Tory logic for this is that the number of fires has gone down, but firefighters dealt with over 167,000 fires in England alone in 2017-18, the highest number for 4 years. And fires, of course, form less than 50% of the total incidents that we do attend. In any event, it doesn't matter if you have 100 fires in any given geographic location or 50. You still need the same amount of firefighters, the same amount of fire engines to tackle any given incident safely. There are more democratic models of governance that could be related to the fire and rescue service, and there's a debate that needs to take place around which one is the most appropriate. PCCs, however, are not the answer. PCC takeovers of fire and rescue services could also create a backdoor route to privatisation. As in other sectors, we've already witnessed creeping privatisation. The Fire Service College at Morton in Marsh, once a publicly owned, publicly funded, world-renowned centre of excellence used by firefighters from all over the world, taken out of public hands and now run as a private entity. PFI contracts for fire stations and other building stock tie in fire and rescue authorities to extortionate contracts, often in exchange for reduced levels of service. Or in the case of London Fire Brigades from years ago, where the entire operational fleet of fire appliances was owned by a company, Asset Corps, who spent as much time in the courtroom as it did in the boardroom before being forced to sell the whole operational fleet to another private entity for £1. The training of firefighters outsourced in some of our biggest brigades to private enterprise. You may think that areas like these are incidental to emergency cover and so therefore less important. But if you followed the Grenfell Tower inquiry, you'll appreciate areas like training are a fundamental concern, not just to the GTI, but to the FBU as well. The previous manifesto vowed to reinstate separate governance arrangements for fire and police, recruit 3,000 new firefighters, and generally invest in the fire and rescue service for the first time in years. And like other sectors, we appreciate being involved in that process in drafting those manifesto commitments. We need to continue to work together to ensure those services currently governed by PCCs continue to work effectively. But when Labour is successful in forming the next UK government, PCCs already running those services need to be removed without disruption and allow all elements of the service to be brought back under full public control. The Fire and Rescue Service has always been about the protection of people. It's never been about the size of the PCC's portfolio, and it should certainly never be about profit. Please support the motion.
Conference, thank you. Gail Cartmail, Unite. Seconding Composite 7. I want to start by asking you to express your solidarity and support with NHS maintenance workers in East Kent on day 2 of their strike against privatisation, against a wholly owned subsidiary. Following the biggest corporate collapse in our country's history, namely Carillion, our UK Defence and Fire Rescue Service has been outsourced to Capita. Conference, what could possibly go wrong? Look at Carillion. Over 3,000 workers lost their jobs and 1,000 more working in its supply chain were thrown on the scrap heap. And when Carillion went under in January, construction sites were deserted. And here in Liverpool, not only did building work stop in January, but the desperately needed new Royal Liverpool Hospital has been mothballed. And it is 18 months overdue this Sunday, and there is still no plan to get it built. First, they found unexplained cracks in the hospital beams, and it's been revealed that the cladding on the building didn't pass fire safety tests. Conference, think about that. Didn't pass fire safety tests. Before Carillion went bust, the Hospital Trust was asked if the cladding was safe, and they said yes. But of course, they lied. And let's face it, Carillion was built on lies. They used so-called aggressive accounting, and projects such as the Royal Liverpool Hospital, which was losing millions, were on paper shown to be in profit. Now, our legal boffins tell me that I can't say Carillion cooked the books, so I won't. But when Carillion went bust, they had liabilities of £7 billion and had just 29 million left in the bank. And the government doled out contracts giving false assurances that all was okay, just as they are with Capita. Then the government said the cost of Carillion's collapse wouldn't be paid by us, the taxpayers. Another lie. The auditors, PwC, will earn £50 million to disband Carillion. And Unite has discovered that because Carillion went into compulsory liquidation and all its workers had to be made redundant and lose their continuity of employment, even if their jobs were transferred, we, the taxpayers, have picked up that bill of another £65 million. Despite the millions we paid, despite the lies, despite the misery of workers losing their jobs, no one has been charged. And if nobody broke any laws, we need new laws. Someone has to be guilty here. And Conference, we need to be angry about the corporate thieves stealing taxpayers' money. But more than that, Conference, we need justice and accountability, and we know that only a Labour government will outlaw bandit capitalism once and for all. Let's get Jeremy into number 10 and pledge to use our public money for public good. Thank you, Conference.
Conference will now consider the reference back, which have been notified to the CAC, which is in the name of Thurston Moulton CLP. They wish to refer back to the section on climate change, renewables and low-carbon energy on page 51 of the National Policy Forum report. Could I ask the delegate from Thurston Moulton to come forward? You have 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Conference. I've got a minute to persuade you to support my reference back. The thing I'm talking about is 3 paragraphs right at the end of the chapter on environment, energy and culture, under the general heading Other Stuff, which kind of tells you what the problem is. Fracking is a major issue and it has not been properly reflected in this report. I'm moving reference back because the report does not develop policy, and even more seriously, it ignores formal submissions from several CLPs calling for a national campaign against fracking. Conference, we have a great policy on climate change. Announced 2 years ago at this conference by Barry Gardner, a comprehensive green energy strategy, including a ban on fracking. But
delegate, time.
Is that it?
That's it,
OK. You can help put this right by supporting my reference back. But I'm also asking the Commission to call an urgent meeting of frontline CLPs to discuss how we can get a national campaign against fracking moving now.
Conference, we're now going to take speakers, and could I remind you, if you are called to go to the speaker's desk to be identified, and obviously tell us your name and the organisation at the start of your contribution. Could I also ask that you all remain in your seats as have been previously directed, and just raise your hands. So we are going to start, down in the front. I'll take them in threes. Over on the left, the woman in the mustard top. Yep. Over there in the blue suit and the... Yep.
Conference, Tony Cairns, Communication Workers Union, and despite the accents, also member of Kingston and Surbiton constituency Labour Party. CW's position to support the composite, but make it clear. CW's NEC made a decision to remain, recommend to our members remain, and we did that in full knowledge that we would probably lose members, and we know we did. But one of the things we campaigned for was remain and reform, and the last paragraph talks about the democratisation of European institutions. Because what we saw in the competition in the postal area, it paved the way for privatisation. And that can't take place anymore. You've had the debate here, Dave Prentice talked about privatisation in public services, and that has to stop. So the approach has to change. And what took place in 2016 isn't the reality of today. This is a rapidly moving debate, and it becomes a matter of political judgment, and we believe that the composite gives the leadership the space, as Keir Starmer said. But the reality is we're not in control of those negotiations. The Conservatives are, and it's a mess. But here's our role, as we see it in the Communication Workers Union. Our role is to unite the country. Our role in this hall is to unite affiliates, CLPs and trade unions, and we believe the motion does exactly that. And we don't believe it's about a straight second referendum, not a rerun of the same arguments, the same rhetoric, the same hostility and the same divisions we saw in our communities. It's not a Tory Brexit or a status quo as far as we're concerned. And when Keir says the option about remain, we need to be clear, as Tim Roach pointed out, the anger that took place in 2016 was an anger against the political elite in this country, and that is why it's important to repeat the reform of the EU is implicit in that final paragraph. Listen, John McDonnell talked about our friends in the media, or as we like to call them in the CW, Tory propagandists. They're going to spin whatever comes out of this to suit their narrative. We see the motion is correct. It talks about the fear that workers have. It talks about the fear that workers have to be worried about their future. In ports, in food, in pharmaceuticals, manufacturing industry, chemicals, public services. Beyond Brexit, that's a real fear. But we heard in debates yesterday on education, on public services, on NHS, on care, about food banks, about universal credits, and about the economy we need, a new deal for workers. The problem is these fears are now, and they're real, and we need to address them. So our focus needs to be, when this government fails the people, which it surely will, that we unite CLPs and trade unions. If I can misquote Corinthians, when I was a child, my dad, a postal worker in this city, dragged me down to deliver leaflets for the Labour Party. And he taught me, I think, to hate the Tories. And now I'm a man. What I realised he didn't tell me was how much to hate the Tories. So here's the message. We demand our rights at work. Get the Tories out.
Hi, Gemma Bolton, first-time delegate, first-time speaker. So, many people here have been calling for a people's vote. I think a true people's vote is a general election. Our party leadership have said we are not calling for another referendum. We've had a referendum. We know there are different views, but we must respect that referendum. Theresa May is a lame duck, unable to take forward the negotiations successfully. She is failing us, the people. We need a deal that works for us, not a deal just to keep peace in the Tory party. And certainly not some of our MPs backing that deal. Our MPs must oppose a deal that does not achieve the 6 tests set out by Keir Starmer. He's not there anymore. A deal that does not meet those tests would be such a threat to jobs, to incomes, to our economy and to our futures that the only way forward is a general election. That we can win, that we must win, and comrades, that we will win. Conference, we all know how divisive the first referendum was. Do you honestly think that a second will achieve anything different? Why tie our hands now? All options should remain on the table until we know the direction that we are going. Comrades, please support our leadership. Please support this motion. Thank you.
I will take 3 more. This is really difficult trying to select somebody. Right, at the back right with the yellow and white, red and white sheet holding up. Yep. Point of order. Point of order is the waving something. It's a fair point of order. So raise your hands, not your booklets. Thank you. The steward on the right, holding his hand up. Yep. Steward on the right. Yep. Who's waving at me? Yeah. And down the front.
Chair, Conference, Manuel Cortes, Transport Salaried Staffs Association. Very proud to be here supporting this motion. You know, the Tories have been having an argument with each other for the last 2 years over Brexit. And we are going to leave this hall today united behind our leader, Jeremy Corbyn, and Keir Starmer. And we are going to give those Tories a bloody nose, because this kamikaze government has to end, and the sooner the better. They cannot be trusted with our future. And of course, remember when Boris said, we can have our cake and eat it, Brexit. What could possibly go wrong? We've been lied, and now we are having to face up to the reality. And let's be candid with the British people, because negotiating any future relationship with the European Union ain't going to be easy, and it's not going to be cost-free either. We need to start having a debate with people that there's going to have to be compromises all around. And one of the compromises must probably is going to have to be, if we're going to keep our place within the single market, it's going to have to be keeping freedom of movement going forward. I think there is no point in hiding to people some of the debates that we're going to have to have going forward. You know, I want a Labour government as soon as we can get one. I wake up every morning, and before I go to bed at night, I look at what I have done that day to try and bring this shower down. and I wake up the next morning thinking what I'm going to be doing that day to bring them down. And I'm sure everybody in this hall is united around this. But look, this is not going to be easy. But let me just say this to you as well, and I'm going to finish on this. Jacob Rees-Mogg, he's let the cat out of the bag. He said it was going to take us 50 years to reap the benefits of Brexit. Well, I don't know about you. I will be 6 foot under in 50 years. And perhaps for somebody like him, who is 3 centuries behind the rest of us, 50 years may not seem like a long time. But for each and every one of us, for our children, for our grandchildren, 50 years is an eternity and something that we can't tolerate. So look, let's get behind our leadership and let's get that general election and Jeremy Corbyn into number 10. Thank you.
Caroline Lello, Stourbridge CLP. Again, I'm sorry. I want to clear a few things up from that compositing meeting. I understand that for members of the press and for the Tories, it may be difficult to understand what good negotiations look like. But this composite was put together with give and take from all sides, and it is something that I am truly proud to have been a part of. I'm also proud of the composite itself, which leaves our leadership free to make the fast-paced decisions needed, while still showing that the Labour Party is always putting what's best for the United Kingdom first. Now, if Mrs May and Mr Raab would like to come to a Labour meeting to see good negotiations, I'm sure they're more than welcome. And I promise we're not going to charge them as much for that lesson as they would charge us to go to university. In fact, I'll even give everyone here a free taster of how the Labour Party works. It was not just key delegates in that compositing meeting. It was every delegate with an accepted motion on Brexit. I am a working mum from Stourbridge. I'm not special. And Stourbridge is not exactly strategically placed or particularly wealthy, although we do have a fantastic PPC in Pete Lowe. But I was able to be a part of this historic meeting and have my CLP's input put forward, because that is what the Labour Party is truly about. Normal people making the right decisions for the many and not for the few.
Three more speakers. Could I ask that if you have spoken once already, you do share it out a bit? And we have, obviously, people who haven't spoken at this conference before. So, right, we're going to go in the middle. Gentleman with a purple shirt on. Yep. On the left, at the front. And at the back, the woman with in the red with black. Yep.
Thanks, Chair. Conference. Tosh MacDonald, President of ASLEF, at the conference for last time as President of ASLEF and the first time as a Labour councillor for Doncaster Town Ward. I come here, conference, to support Composite 6. But I will say this is the first conference I've been to where, in the interest of trade union discipline and unity, I have sat on my hands a bit. Just want to make one thing clear. I don't have to sit on my hands on this debate, because I believe we will get a Labour government, and I believe Jeremy Corbyn, Keir Starmer and our fantastic shadow cabinet that will become a cabinet can get us a deal that the Tories can't get, and will get us a deal that meets the 6 criteria. Now, to where I am. Sometimes you have to go backwards to look forward. And I want to talk about nearly 40 years ago when I started work on the railway, and everything was in public ownership. We didn't have to worry about where contracts went. Every day we moved coal from a pit to a power station, and we owned that pit. We had no privateers to pay. The workers at that pit were represented by a union, and they had collective bargaining. We moved it on trains, on a railway that we owned, where the workers were represented by trade unions and had collective bargaining. We moved it to power stations that we owned, and the workers were represented by trade unions, and we had collective bargaining. The power that was created was distributed by us, for us, to places where it was needed, not where the greatest profit was. You know, it went to schools that we owned. It went to hospitals that we owned. It went to houses that we had built, and we gave long, secure tenancies to people, and we maintained with direct labour. We used gas, we used electricity, we used water, and we owned it all. There was no parasites milking stuff out of it. That's when I started in '79, and we were moving forward. It was great from where we'd come from nationalisation, and we were getting better and better. But you know, a month before I started work, Thatcher was elected as Prime Minister. And I say this many times, and it's still true, I hated her. I wish I could be like Jeremy and rise above it, but I can't. And I did hate her that much that I did set my alarm clock an hour earlier than I needed, just so I could hate her for an hour longer. Now, since she died, I don't do that anymore. I just set my alarm at the right time, but I still wake up an hour earlier. I can't help it. But this is the simplest way to ensure that we don't have to worry about where government contracts go, where public contracts go. We do it ourselves. We don't have the privateers milking money out of our industry, out of our economy. It all comes into our economy, and it helps to make one thing work against another. When we're investing in water, we don't put the bills up to pay for it. We take the money from another public service that is making profit for us and invest that way. Instead of coming to people and saying, we've got to put your bills up so we can make a more efficient service to make us more money, we make it better for all of us. Public ownership. I am so pleased we're in a Labour Party with a Labour leadership and a shadow cabinet, the best shadow cabinet I've seen in the Labour Party in my lifetime. And I will just finish on this, comrades. I'll finish on this. It might be a surprise to some of you, but some of the Labour leaders we've had weren't my first choice. But I never worked against any of them. None of them. I accepted the decision, and I call on all Labour Party members, whether it's the 0.04% in Parliament or the 500,000 plus that we have in this country. And I'm going to ask one last thing before I get down. Let's not refer to people as ordinary anymore, or some of the worst things that some parliamentary party members have called us, chucker. Let's not refer to people as ordinary, because in my life, and certainly within our party and our movement, I have never met one ordinary person in my life. Every one of you is extraordinary. Support the composite.
Thank you, comrades. My name is Raj Gill from Ealing, Central and Acton CLP. I'd like to say I'm encouraged by the words of Cam Starmer when he talk about internationalism. I'm also encouraged by his words that he's not leaving Remain as an option. So I will declare my intent. I voted Remain and I am a Remainer. I'd like to say, as an ex-automotive worker, car worker, and a truck worker, I worked at Ford for 14 years, and I was a leading shop steward for the Transport and General Worker Union. Now, what I'd like to say to you might interest you, that Ford manufacturing took their kit operation to Spain. Part of that operation went to Portugal. Fiat, who took over part of cargo truck manufacturing, took their manufacturing back to Italy. Now, they didn't do that because they are part of some kind of a foreign organization. They took their companies to part of the world, which happened to be in Europe, to a place where there was cheap labor, where they could make a great profit. Now, our interest, that's the interest of the working class, interest of the socialists, is common interest. Whether it's in a deprived area of Britain or any part of Europe, we got the same issues, we got the same problems. So we cannot give in to any kind of racism or bigotry, because the fascism in certain part of Europe is on the rise. We gave solidarity to the Spanish workers when they fought Franco, fascism, international solidarity. We fought the fascists in Germany through international solidarity. So we have a common interest with the workers of European workers as with the interests of the working class in Britain. So I say this, what we need to do, we need to ensure that the bad aspects of EU, which is not in the interest of the working class, we have to reform. We have to get rid. We have to democratize the European Union. But at the same time, we have to ensure that any successive government will put the interests of British people in trying to keep the jobs which we had in Britain. Gillette went to Poland. Why did Gillette go to Poland after many, many decades in Britain? So what I'm saying, we need to be part of the European Union. We cannot rule it out. So comrade, international solidarity to all of the working class and trade union movement.
Joshua Lewis, Cardiff North CLP. Point of order for the Chair. I would just ask the Chair and following chairs to respect the precedent that was set at Brighton Conference last year in not using gendered language when calling delegates to the stage. So please refrain from using pronouns and just use delegate. Thank you.
Conference Chair Javad Khan speaking on behalf of GMB. Now, our conferences, we discuss lots of important topics, but don't always join the dots between them. So I'd like to briefly talk about our union's concerns about what Brexit could do to insecure work. First of all, I am so proud that my union, GMB, has been at the forefront of standing up for workers in the gig economy and on insecure contracts. We have stood up to Uber, to Hermes, and now we are taking the fight to Amazon to improve conditions and ensure people can exercise their full rights at work. It might look like David versus Goliath, but you know what? David actually won. The problem of insecure work is so widespread. It is about the cynical use of agency contracts to hire and fire at short notice. It is about short and zero-hour contracts where the flexibility is always with the boss more than the worker. The Tories have allowed this to continue and refuse to take sufficient action. They defend the indefensible. GMB's experience is that the Tories' chaotic and reckless approach to Brexit risks making a bad situation even worse. There are workplaces in manufacturing which traditionally have provided decent, secure employment. Now some are now trying to use agencies much more than before. GMB is fighting this, but the Tory approach to Brexit means some employers don't even know how they will be running their businesses in 6 months' time. GMB believes the Tory approach to Brexit is going to be bad for a wide range of sectors in the economy, and jobs could soon be put at risk. And you know who is always first out the door? Insecure workers on agency and temporary contracts and those with no guaranteed hours. Conference, no one voted for this in 2016. That is why we must do everything we can to stop a hard Tory Brexit which undermines our workers, and it is why we need Labour into government and in power as soon as possible to implement a manifesto of union and employment rights which our country desperately needs. The only insecure workers I want to see in this country are the Tories in government. Thank you.
Conference, Bryn Jones, Bath CLP, which is right next door to the constituency of someone called Jacob Rees-Mogg, which puts us in a very handy position for going over and asking embarrassing questions about what he's doing with his investments, i.e. taking them out of the EU in order to safeguard his own position, even when everyone else suffers. Comrades, I want to make 3 brief points. And that they all concern caution on these calls for a people's vote, a referendum. And I'm sure our leadership will have this in their mind, but we also need to consider it so we don't get trapped into criticising them for a sellout. The 3 points are, firstly, we will not, as a party, be in charge, be able to decide the wording of the referendum. The Tory government still will have enough votes to phrase the referendum in such a way that it will not serve either the interests of Remain or the kind of Brexit deal that we want. Second point, even if a people's vote or a referendum goes ahead, the consequences for our party and our chances of government could be quite dangerous. There would be a risk. There would be a risk if it was a close result, and depending on the wording of the successful option chosen in the referendum, there is a risk that it could continue the split in the country, continue the split amongst our voters, our supporters, and continue and worsen the split in our party. And therefore, comrades, I'm saying and asking our leadership to make this a really well thought out, considered option if they want to choose it. What we want is not, as speakers have said, what we want is not referendum, is not a people's vote, because that does not give us the opportunity to put in practice our policies. Our overriding objective must be a general election and the return of a Labour government under Jeremy Corbyn. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take 3 more speakers, then we're going to move on to Rebecca's speech, but we will be able to continue with the debate this afternoon. So, down on the front. Yep, in the middle. Yep. Yes, you pointing at yourself.
Which one? They've both got up. Is it the woman in black or the chap?
No, this one.
Yes, tell the woman.
And then I'll take one right at the back, the person, the delegate, holding his right arm up with his left hand because he's had his hand up in the air that long.
Conference. My name is Barbara Pezzini. I am a delegate for Maidstone and the Will CLP, a member of the National Union for Journalists. I'm a first-time delegate and I'm a first-time speaker. I am here to ask you to support the motion on Brexit. My CLP, which is sited in a Leave area, and in the past 2 years has been not just sitting on the fence, has been glued to the fence, in this whole Brexit debate, gave me an almost unanimous mandate to come here and support a public vote. Conference, you will know the statistics that 86% of Labour Party members now support a public vote. In fact, according to the latest YouGov polling, Labour would gain 1.5 million votes and 60 new seats if it supported a public vote. In Maidstone and the Weald, where 76% voted to leave the EU, we have observed a similar mood swing in the local press and on the doorstep. Maidstone voters supported Brexit as an ideal and a protest, but now are experiencing what the reality of this disastrous story Brexit looks like. The reality is very different. We are living a poorer and more precarious life. We demand a new say on this. And this say should not exclude preserving our relationship with the European Union and an option to remain. Conference. Maidstone plays it safe. And when a town that has been represented in Parliament by arch-conservatives such as Benjamin Disraeli and Anne Widdecombe, a town that has always been, even within party politics, a cautious player, when Maidstone CLP mandates me nearly unanimously in support for a public vote, it definitely means that the mood in the country is changing. Let's stop sitting on the fence. Please, Conference, support the motion on Brexit. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Conference. Steve Turner, Unite, standing in support of Composite 5. Conference, in less than 6 months we leave the European Union, and that is a result of the outcome of the 2016 referendum, and we have to respect it. We have to recognise We have to recognise that while a majority of Labour voters and trade unionists may have voted to remain, many didn't. Across our nations, millions feel abandoned in a rapidly changing world and betrayed by a political elite that doesn't speak to or for them. Millions feel left behind in communities starved of investment and battered by years of austerity, often working in poverty, exploited by greedy bosses lining their own pockets from our misery, while the next generation of our young people are robbed of hope and the opportunities they so desperately desire. Conference, a perfect storm has divided our nations, and it's our job, our duty to make history and step up to create the climate and conditions to deliver a socialist Labour government. Because Conference, only Labour can remove the Tory red lines and encourage constructive engagement to secure access to the single market and membership of a customs union that protects our jobs and investments. Only Labour has the values to protect long fought for protections for citizens, consumers and our environment. Only Labour can secure a deal that protects the peace in Northern Ireland and ensures no restrictions between Gibraltar and Spain. Only Labour will end the austerity, build the homes we so desperately need, invest in public services, regulate the labour market and end the gross exploitation of migrant workers. Conference, a Brexit without Labour's answers to what are genuine fears and concerns will only add to deep-rooted crisis of belonging and identity in our nations, something that's already fuelling a growing and very dangerous far right. Conference, we demand a Brexit that works for the many, not the few. So when the Tories return from Brussels with no deal or a deal that fails our tests, that's our moment. That's our moment to demand they step aside, our moment to send a broken government back to the country in a general election. And Conference, if the Tory benches aren't brave enough to do that, to stand up themselves to the Johnson Moggs of this world, if they fail us, we demand they go back to the people with a vote on the deal. And Conference, that is not a second referendum. Despite what Keir may have said earlier, it's a public vote on the terms of our departure. Conference, we desperately need a better, fairer society. We need to heal the wounds of Brexit, not reopen them. And only our movement, united with a proud socialist Labour government, is capable of doing that. Support the composite.
Point of order.
Sorry to interrupt. I just want to say, we've got a great mass movement here and there's so many amazing delegates here to speak that it's quite a confusing way of picking speakers, and I think it might be worth an idea for the Conference Arrangements Committee next year to review that, perhaps some sort of name out of the hat or something.
We'll certainly consider it. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Conference. First of all, I'd like to say that, yes, this is my second time speaking, but I feel that Brexit is an important thing to bring up, especially for my constituency. I am against having a people's vote on the basis that in my constituency we voted overwhelmingly to leave. And my worry is if we go against the people's will, we'll lose those voters. I implore you all, come to Blythe Valley, go to Bowes Court where the buildings are crumbling behind St Wilfrid's Catholic Church. Tell them why you want us to remain.
Go to Coupin Ward, tell them why you want us to remain, and go to Kitty Brewster, when for too long they have felt marginalised, like they have not had their voices heard. I personally would have voted Remain at the time, but now I am against it because I believe the European Union to be a capitalist club that is for the few, not the many. It uses free trade to take advantage of those who are in Eastern Europe. Poles, Romanians, who come over for a better life, and our wages are undercut because the bosses think, because of the European Union, they can pay them less. This is a complete and utter farce. We must work to actually improve our nation for all the people in this country, European migrants. I am not against Europe. I myself am a European. I am a third-generation Polish refugee family from Poland, expelled because of the German minority. My family were Germans living in Poland. They were expelled after the war. They came to Britain for a better life, and they got the exact same rights because they were in a union with other British workers. They got the same pay because they were in a union. And since Thatcher brought in free trade in Europe, that is when things went downhill. So I implore you, we need a general election, not a people's vote. We need the Tories out so we can get a man like Jeremy Corbyn to negotiate, because I've seen videos of Michel Barnier and Corbyn being friendlier than he is with David Davies or Dominic Raab or whatever his name is. But I tell you what, Corbyn will negotiate far better than what these Tories can do, and so please push for a general election, not a people's vote. Thank you.
Bruce Hogan, Forester Dean CLP, and haven't I drawn the short straw trying to follow that? I'd just like to say that, in a way, I'm going to swim against the tide here, because I don't believe a people's vote is somehow undemocratic, and somehow a general election is. If we call a general election, we're not going to be respecting the right of the result of the last general election. We're going to try and change it. Now, how many people in this hall can honestly say that they didn't know somebody, a friend, a colleague, a family member, who voted to leave in the referendum, who since hasn't changed their mind and wishes dearly that they voted Remain? Overwhelmingly, in the time since that red bus drove around with the biggest red lie on the side of it, hundreds of thousands of people in this country have changed their minds and realised that they were conned. Asking them to reconsider is not anti-democratic. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm going to be supporting this motion. And I dearly hope that we get a general election sooner rather than later to see this principled man sitting in 10 Downing Street. It will be the proudest day of my life if that happens. But don't swallow the hogwash that asking the people, is that what you really meant, is somehow anti-democratic. Thank you, Conference.